Hello, everyone. I'm Mr.Graveveil. I want to tell you a horror story. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get ready for a story you've never heard before. I took the job because I needed money. Plain and simple. No one dreams of working in a butcher shop, especially not the kind tucked between an abandoned laundromat and a pawn shop with bulletproof glass on the windows. But it paid well. Too well, maybe. That should have been my first red flag. The place was freezing, colder than it needed to be. Not just in the storage areas everywhere. Even the office felt like a walk-in freezer. Mr. Delano, the owner, was pale and soft-spoken, with this way of watching you even when you weren't looking at him. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it didn't reach his eyes. He gave me a list of rules that first morning. Most of them made sense: keep the knives clean, label every cut, never let meat sit too long unrefrigerated. But then there were the other ones. Never open the third door in the back hallway. Don't ask about the night shift. If you hear machinery running after hours, leave it alone. I laughed at first, thinking it was some weird hazing thing. But he didn't laugh with me. He just stared, like he was waiting for me to finish so he could move on. At the end of the shift, I stayed behind to clean the counters. That's when I noticed the faint humming sound, like a saw blade idling in the distance. No one else seemed to hear it, and for some reason, I didn't ask. By the end of my third shift, the shine of just a weird job had worn off. Things weren't right. I started noticing gaps, like how we never received deliveries. Not once. No trucks, no vendors, no invoices. The meat was just there every morning, fully stocked, and the labeling? It was inconsistent. Some trays had vague stickers, shoulder cut, mixed portions, but no origin, no date, no USDA markings. Just generic, sterile words. Sometimes the packaging felt like it had been repacked, like someone had unwrapped it and put it back together. One night I stayed later than I should have, trying to reorganize the cold room. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't rot. It was metallic, like hot pennies. And it didn't come from the meat racks. It came from behind the reinforced door marked private, the one with the digital lock Mr. Delano always had on him. The other workers, if you could call them that, barely acknowledged me. There were only 2 others, and they looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. They avoided eye contact, moved robotically, and never spoke unless spoken to. When I asked the older one about the third door, he just muttered, "Don't," and walked away. That night, the saw started up again. This time, it sounded closer. The electrical system had been glitching for a few days, lights flickering. Brief power dips that made the freezers groan. Delano told me not to touch anything, but when the circuit blew near the cold room, I had no choice but to reset it myself. He wasn't there that night. I moved the rolling shelf unit to reach the breaker panel. That's when I noticed the panel wasn't behind the wall like I'd assumed. Instead, there was a narrow recess, hidden, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. I leaned in with my flashlight. The air was even colder inside that gap, like it hadn't been touched in years. Cobwebs clung to my sleeves as I reached for a cardboard box tucked deep in the shadows. It was heavier than I expected. Inside, a collection of objects that didn't belong in a butcher shop. Watches, bracelets, even a pair of glasses with a cracked lens. Some had dried reddish stains. Others were clearly damaged, crushed, or warped by force. At the bottom of the box was a wallet. I opened it. A driver's license stared back at me. A woman, mid-30s, smiling in the photo. The expiration date had passed 2 years ago. I put everything back exactly where I found it. I didn't tell anyone. But that night, the humming of the saw didn't stop. It ran until morning. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman's license, her face. That polite DMV smile. I'd never seen her around the shop. Never seen any customers, actually. Most of the orders were called in, paid online, and picked up by someone who never came inside. The next evening, I arrived early. Mr. Delano wasn't in yet. I walked past the prep stations, past the door marked private. My hand hovered over the keypad. I didn't know the code. But the freezer next to it, the one we were told never to open unless instructed, it was unlocked. I pulled the handle slowly. The hinges groaned, loud in the silence. My breath fogged immediately. It was packed racks of meat, hanging like a gallery of cuts. But it didn't look right. The shapes were too long, too smooth in places. Some had tattoos. One had a wedding ring still on. I staggered back, my stomach turning. The cold wasn't just temperature. It was something else. Something deep and invasive. And then, behind the hanging slabs, I saw it. A plastic crate with a yellow sticker. The label read, in red marker, pending, not bled. The door slammed behind me. I turned. Mr. Delano stood there, gloves on, holding something heavy wrapped in cloth. His eyes were wide but calm, like this was just another part of the process. Somewhere in the back, the industrial saw started to spin up. I bolted between the hanging bodies, knocking into cold flesh, hearing chains creak above me. My breath turned to ice in my lungs as I crashed into the metal shelving, trying to find a way out. The door wouldn't budge. It locked from the outside. Behind me, the sound of the saw rose to a piercing whine. I ran toward the emergency hatch in the back corner. I'd seen it during training, but was told never to use it unless the power failed. I slipped on something wet, hit the floor hard, and scrambled up, hands stinging, red streaks on the tiles. Not all of it was mine. The lights flickered as I pushed open the hatch. A rusted ladder led down into darkness. I didn't care. I slid down, scraping my palms raw. Above me, I heard the saw cut through something hard. Then footsteps. Slow, measured, coming closer. The hallway below was tight and full of pipes. It smelled like old grease and iron. I followed it blindly, hearing the hatch slam open behind me. I turned a corner and found a rusted service door. I kicked it with everything I had. Once, twice on the third try, it gave way. I fell out into an alley, gasping. I didn't look back. I ran until my legs gave out. Then I crawled. When I reached the street, I flagged down the first car I saw. The driver didn't even ask questions. He just saw my face and opened the door. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. I told the police everything, every detail. The freezer, the crate, the bodies. I took them to the shop the next morning. It was empty. Not just closed cleared out, like it had never operated. The counters were gone. The freezers were disconnected. The walls were freshly painted. No sign of Delano. No records of the business. The badge number I gave them for inspection led to a building permit for a storage unit 3 blocks away. They looked at me like I was delusional. Maybe I looked it too bloodied, eyes wild, voice shaking. One officer pulled me aside gently and asked if I'd recently stopped taking any medication. That was the last straw. I stopped trying to explain. Weeks passed. I left the city. Started working night shifts at a gas station in another state. The cold still bothered me. I jumped every time the fridge compressors kicked in. Then last night, I came home and found a small box on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single vacuum-sealed package, wrapped like prime cut meat. No label except one thing. A small sticker with my name on it. The same labels we used at the shop. I haven't opened it. I don't want to. But I keep checking the corners of my apartment now, listening at night. Every once in a while, I swear I can hear that industrial saw. Not in the distance. Right behind the wall. I wasn't expecting much when I took the night shift at the butcher shop. Quiet hours, decent pay, no customers to deal with sounded ideal. It was a small place, tucked at the edge of a commercial block, the kind of shop you don't notice unless you're looking for it. The first thing I noticed when I arrived was how quiet everything was, not just peaceful dead quiet. No hum of refrigeration units, no buzz from fluorescent lights, just silence. Even my own footsteps sounded muted. The owner, Mr. Holland, barely said 2 sentences when handing me the keys. Stick to the list. Don't go near the main freezer. And if something sounds off, ignore it. It'll pass. He smiled when he said it, but the smile didn't look right. It looked like he was forcing it onto his face, like a mask that didn't fit. The shop layout was simple: prep table, counters, back room with 4 walk-in freezers. 3 labeled with standard cuts. 1 was unlabeled, locked with a thick industrial latch and a separate padlock. That one, I was told, never gets opened at night. Everything felt overly controlled. There was a checklist printed in bold red. Verify locks. Monitor temperatures. Do not disturb freezer 4. The kind of tone you'd expect in a lab, not a butcher shop. Around midnight, I heard the sound of metal settling. It came from the back. I stayed in my seat. I told myself it was nothing. But I already knew I wasn't going to make it through the week. By the 3rd night, I stopped pretending the noises weren't happening. It always started the same way. Just after midnight, the metal latch on freezer 4 would rattle. Not like it was loose, but like it was being touched from the inside. Slow, irregular vibrations, followed by a low, drawn-out thud, like something shifting weight behind the door. I tried not to look at it. I really did. But every time the sound came, I found myself staring at that heavy steel door, wondering what could make a noise like that. The air smelled off back there. Too heavy. The usual sharp, clean scent of cold meat was replaced by something metallic, faintly sour, like old blood on warm steel. And sometimes, when I leaned close enough, I thought I heard breathing, not mechanical, not airflow, rhythmic, human. During a shift change, I caught one of the day workers out back, smoking alone. He looked tired, hollow-eyed. I asked how long he'd worked there. 6 weeks, he said. 3rd guy this year. I asked what happened to the others. He looked at the ground, crushed his cigarette, and said, "No one lasts long once they hear it." He walked away before I could ask what it was. That night, I brought earplugs. But even with them in, I still heard the latch move. The 5th night started with something simple, a mechanical failure. One of the smaller freezers started to beep loud, sharp, and constant. The internal temperature was spiking. I opened it and felt warm air rush out, along with the scent of rapidly thawing meat. Half the contents would spoil within the hour. I remembered the emergency procedure printed above the sink. If any unit fails, transfer perishables to backup storage. But the only available space was inside freezer 4, the one I wasn't supposed to touch. I stood in front of the steel door for a long time. The padlock was still there, thick and heavy, but the spare key was hanging on the emergency hook behind the prep counter, right where it always was. I kept telling myself I was just doing my job, salvaging product, following instructions, nothing more. The key felt cold in my hand. My breath caught when the lock clicked open. That sound echoed through the shop louder than it should have. Before I opened it, I pressed my ear against the metal, just for a second. What I heard wasn't mechanical. It was whispering, low, choked, not words exactly, just the pattern of words, pleading, like someone trying to talk through duct tape. I should have walked away, locked it again, but I didn't. The freezer door creaked as I opened it, just a few inches. A blast of cold air hit me in the face, but it wasn't clean. It was thick, humid, and wrong. The kind of cold that clings to your skin, that smells of metal and mold and something deeper. Decay. Inside, it wasn't like the other units. No hanging hooks, no labeled trays, no shelves, just stacks. Covered with tarps, wrapped in plastic sheeting. Some moved. Not in a cold, settling kind of way. I mean moved. I froze. My brain refused to register what my eyes were telling me. One of the shapes twitched violently, then stopped. Another made a sound like breath forced through a blocked airway. That's when I heard it. A voice, muffled, desperate, definitely human. It came from the far end of the freezer, under one of the tarps. Then another, then more. They weren't dead. At least, not all of them. I staggered backward, slamming the door shut. My hands trembled so badly, I dropped the padlock. As I reached down to grab it, I heard something from the other side of the door. Tap, tap, tap. Then a pause. Then, help. It was barely a whisper, but it was there, pressed against the other side of the steel. Fingernails scraped the inside surface. Slow, weak. I stood there, holding the lock, paralyzed. That's when the lights flickered, and I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slowly, still holding the open padlock. Mr. Holland was standing in the doorway, his apron already stained, his eyes calm like he'd just walked in on someone rearranging cans. There was no panic, no surprise, just disappointment. "You weren't supposed to hear that," he said, voice quiet, almost regretful. "Now we'll have to do things differently." My legs refused to move. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The lock I'd just removed was now on the floor between us. He didn't run. He didn't yell. He just moved forward with the kind of slow, patient steps that made it clear he'd done this before, many times. "I'm careful," he said, reaching under the prep counter. "I'm methodical, but people always get curious." He pulled out something heavy wrapped in cloth. The second he unrolled it, I saw the glint of steel. A curved blade, not for meat, for splitting bone. I turned and ran. The hallway felt longer than it ever had. My boots slipped on something wet blood, maybe water. I couldn't tell. I crashed into the back door, but it was chained shut. I spun around. The lights went out. Total blackness. Then, behind me, the sound I'd only ever heard through the walls, the whining hum of the industrial saw grinding to life. I dropped to the floor and crawled blindly. My hand found a vent cover loose in the wall. I didn't think. I squeezed through. The screaming started just as I disappeared into the crawl space. I don't know how long I was down there. The crawl space behind the freezer led to an old maintenance tunnel, half collapsed, full of dust and rusted tools. I followed the darkness until I found a loose grate, kicked it out, and emerged into an alley I didn't recognize. I didn't look back. Not once. I ran until my legs burned, flagged down a cab, and gave the driver an address I hadn't memorized in years, my sister's place, 2 towns over. I told her I'd been mugged. I didn't mention the whispers, the bodies, the saw. I couldn't. The next day, I called the police. They checked the shop, told me it was just a regular butcher's. No back room like the one I described. No freezer 4. They said maybe I was sleep-deprived, stressed. Maybe I hallucinated. Maybe. I moved again. Changed my number. Tried to forget, but last night, something arrived at my door. A package. No sender. Wrapped in brown paper, tightly sealed. Inside was a pair of earplugs, the same brand I used at the shop. And a note. One line, handwritten in red ink. "Thanks for covering the shift. I haven't slept since." And just now, through the thin wall of my apartment, I swear, I heard the whine of a saw, followed by something else. A knock, soft, and then, faintly, help. I didn't think twice when I saw the job listing. Full-time, good pay, no experience required. Just a simple note. Night butcher wanted. Must work alone. Discretion essential. The address was on the edge of the industrial district, in a part of town that always looked foggy, even in daylight. The building didn't have a sign, just blacked-out windows and a buzzing overhead light that flickered when I walked under it. Inside, the place was colder than I expected. Not just physically something about it, felt. Still, like even the air had stopped moving. The man who greeted me didn't shake my hand. He just looked at me for a long time, like he was waiting for me to do something wrong. "You got a strong stomach?" he asked. I blinked. "I guess so. That's all I need to know." That was it. No resume, no questions about my experience. Just that one line. He handed me an apron, a laminated badge with no name, and said I could start the next night. I tried to ask more about hours, duties, pay, but he was already walking away. His back was straight, stiff, like a soldier returning to position. Before I left, I looked around one last time. The walls were clean, too clean, bleached in a way that made them glow under the flickering lights. And somewhere deeper in the building, I thought I heard a low hum, like a machine struggling to breathe. I told myself it was refrigeration. I was wrong. On my first official night, I expected instructions, maybe a walkthrough. But the shop was dark when I arrived. The only light came from a single bulb swinging above the back counter, casting long, jerking shadows. There were no other employees. No manager. Just a handwritten note on the stainless steel table. Clock in. Don't open the second freezer. Sanitize everything twice. Keep the blinds down. The list didn't explain anything. And the part about the second freezer was underlined 4 times, as if that's where all the meaning lived. I tried to stay focused. The first task was simple. Wipe down surfaces. But even the cloth smelled wrong, like old bleach mixed with rust. The butcher knives were already too clean. Not just sanitized, but polished, like they'd never been used. Then I heard it. A breath. Slow. Damp. Coming from the back room. I froze. Thought maybe it was the ventilation. But it didn't cycle, it pulsed. It inhaled. I peeked through the plastic strip curtain that separated the prep area from the cold storage. There were 3 freezers. The second one had a heavy chain looped through its handle, secured with an industrial-grade padlock. The floor in front of it was wet. It wasn't dripping from the ceiling. The puddle was spreading outward, like something inside was sweating, or leaking. The next few nights blurred together. There was no formal training. Just brief, whispered instructions left on folded notes beside the slicer. Tasks that didn't follow any pattern. Wrap and label. Keep lights off in back freezer after 2 a.m. Do not look into the drain. No explanations, no feedback, just silence. The kind that stretched and pressed against your eardrums. The meat I was told to handle came pre-cut, but unlabeled. No weights, no dates. No supplier information. Just red flesh in black trays, wrapped too tightly, like someone had sealed them in panic. I noticed that none of the cuts matched what I learned online. Too stringy. Too thick in the wrong places. Some looked like shoulder blades, but wrong. One night, I heard a bang from the back. I froze mid-wrap. The padlock on the second freezer had shifted. It swung just slightly, tapping against the steel with a slow, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap. I should have left right then. Instead, I returned to the table. A new note was waiting for me. If it sounds like it's asking to be let out, it's not. Finish your work. I didn't remember hearing a door open. I didn't hear anyone come in, but the note was fresh. The ink was still wet. That night, I was told to repackage ground meat into smaller containers. Simple task. Open the bulk tray, weigh out portions, reseal. I lifted the first lid and immediately felt something was wrong. The meat looked wet, not just fresh slick, unnaturally shiny. The color was off too, a deep maroon closer to dried blood than beef. As I scooped the first portion, something caught under my fingernail. I dropped the spatula, heart racing. I dug gently with the tip of the scale's hook. A fingernail, still attached to a sliver of skin. I stepped back, stomach rising to my throat. But part of me had to confirm what I hoped was a horrible mistake. I opened another tray. Near the bottom was a necklace, half melted, tangled in cartilage. A small pendant shaped like a sun, burnt into the flesh. I'd seen one like it before, on the girl who was ahead of me in line when I came in for the interview. I didn't scream. I didn't throw everything and run. I just stood there, hands shaking, meat cooling on the table, as I heard the sound of a soft, dragging step across the floor behind me. I turned slowly. No one was there. But the chain on the second freezer was no longer tight. It hung loose, barely touching the floor, and the door, it was cracked open. Only a few inches. Just wide enough for an eye to watch me through the gap. I didn't sleep after that night. I didn't even leave the building. Something told me I wouldn't get far. My phone had no signal. The exit doors were bolted shut from the outside. I wasn't working anymore. I was being kept. The next evening, I found a metal cabinet behind the prep station. It had always been locked, but the key was in the sink drain, as if placed there for me to find. Inside were photos, dozens, all of them of people in aprons, holding knives, smiling nervously. Some I recognized from the wall near the back exit, the employees of the month. Others I remembered from the waiting room during my interview. Each file had notes, name, date of hire, date of disappearance. Some were redacted. One file had a big red circle around the words, stomach too weak, rejected. That's when I heard the chain fall completely off the freezer door. It clanged against the tile. Then came the voice. You lasted longer than most, Holland said behind me. I turned to face him. He wasn't angry. He was smiling. Calm. You passed the first test, he said, stepping aside. Now let's see how far you make it through the second. He opened the freezer wide. Inside, it wasn't cold. The air that rolled out was warm, humid, and from the darkness within, something breathed. He shoved me inside before I could react. The door slammed behind me, and I heard the latch click into place. I beat my fists against the metal, screaming, but the sound died in the thick, humid air. It wasn't cold at all. It was warm like a living thing. The walls sweated. The floor pulsed slightly beneath my feet. And the smell, it wasn't just rot. It was human. I stumbled forward, hoping to find something, anything. My hand brushed against plastic vacuum-sealed meat, stacked in crates. I opened one. A face stared back at me through the foggy wrap. Eyes still open, lips parted in a frozen breath. I turned to run, slipped on something slick, and fell hard. The lights flicked on, dim red like taillights in fog. That's when I saw them people, curled in corners, some moaning, others silent. Too weak to speak, too far gone. They weren't kept for slaughter. They were processed slowly. I screamed again, but no one answered, until I heard footsteps outside. Then the sound of a door creaking open, and a voice, calm, measured. First question, do you have a strong stomach? Someone new had arrived. I backed into the darkest corner of the freezer, knees pulled to my chest, trying to disappear among the crates. The cycle wasn't over. It was just beginning again. If you've ever gone through something similar, or know someone who has, leave a comment below. Sometimes just telling it is already a way to protect yourself. And if this video made you think twice before letting your guard down, then it was already worth it. Here, we don't tell stories to entertain. We tell them to warn. Because real fear doesn't jump scare you. It silences. It freezes. And if you want to keep hearing stories that might help keep you alive, subscribe. The next story could be yours.